What's going on, everybody? It is the 56th installment of Pucks and Brews post NHL Trade Deadline. I am your host, Michael Shades Faracino, alongside Liam the Chillmaster Godimer. And Liam, what a day it was yesterday.
An eventful trade deadline, not all on trade deadline day, and you usually don't see that.
Yeah, especially the last 2 years. But hold on. First off, let's put the straw in the cold brew, the large cold brew. Take a sip. Cheers, my man. Ah, I needed the caffeine so badly, so this is going to be good. So, first off, let's start this episode with what we ended last episode on as part of the intro here. How was the AEW show?
It was good. I served as a seat filler for their collision taping at Gas South Arena. It was good. I enjoyed it. They sat me not in the opening 5 rows on the floor, but the lower bowl. I was in like the first row, like right in the middle. So had a really nice seat. Didn't really have to stand up to look over anybody, which was nice. But for me, I mean, look, I'm a wrestling fan, but I don't think I'm as big of a wrestling fan as, others. It was a long show, to do a 3 hour ROH taping on top of a 2.5 hour collision. It was a lot. And for a weeknight, you don't get out of there until 12:15. I mean, hey, Tony Khan came out, he explained it. He said that AEW, acquired ROH and that they tape shows before and after collision. I thought the matches were good. I thought it was a little bit much, but I thought the AEW portion was excellent. A lot of memorable names. So
Yeah, that's I've been to a couple AEW tapings, and before and after they acquired Ring of Honor, and the Ring of Honor taping one night we were there in the building until almost like 12:30. And that was the one where my buddy got us onto the floor, me and my friends who I was with.
right, and I love wrestling. Don't get me wrong,
Oh
but
yeah.
I think you can lose the crowd a little bit that way.
Mm.
But it was really
Oh,
exciting.
100%.
I don't think I don't think I'll ever be that close to the ring at a professional wrestling event again. So, unless they do another seat filler. If you ever have a chance to be a seat filler, absolutely do it. It was pretty cool.
Yeah, text me on camera how that came about, just so, I have the inside info and not everybody else does.
Right, right. No, it was did feel a little bit special. Would be lying if I said I didn't. So, it was nice.
Hey, we might be getting Forbidden Door in April, or excuse me, June at Arthur Ashe, so I'm excited.
Oh, that's gonna be fun. Yeah.
Oh yeah, as soon as they announce the tickets for that, I'm gonna get a bunch of people and go, "Are you in or are you not in? If so, what's your max?" And then we'll talk to our other friend who helps us get tickets.
Right, right, and go from there. But no, it was a good show. And hopefully they'll be back soon. So.
Yeah, glad you had fun, and I'm probably, if I'm not gonna watch it tonight, definitely over the course of the next few days before Dynamite. So
I would love to tell everybody what happened, but I don't want to spoil anything. So, with Collision airing tonight. So, you know.
well, honestly, this podcast episode isn't going to be out until tomorrow
All right,
anyway, so go
so
ahead, spoil it.
so there was a flaming table incident. That was cool. Formerly Buddy Murphy in WWE, Aleister Black, formerly Aleister Black as well. And I don't know who the other one was, but I
Brody
liked
King.
he was going "Roo, roo," like the crowd. Like, yeah,
Yeah, the "Hur, hur."
that was pretty cool. The crowd was getting behind him on that, and had trouble, getting the table to burst out into full on flames, in the beginning. But it was a really cool spot. Edge came out. He was sitting right next to me.
Who?
That's what I was gonna tell you. Adam Copeland
Thank
was
you.
sitting next. He was like, so we're on. So me and my two other friends who I was seat filling with were on the floor. This was before I got moved to the back.
Hmm.
But I was on the floor and literally 3 seats next to me. Edge in a mask. And when Christian's segment came out, he was sitting there for like 45 minutes to an hour before Christian's segment. Christian Cage comes out and then like just out of nowhere, just punches him from behind and they start fighting right next to us. Edge pulls off the mask. It's really epic. You're gonna want to watch it. It was a
Oh, that's
cool.
cool. So, did you possibly make it on TV?
I was on TV, yes.
Let's go.
Like I was looking like straight across to the non-camera side, and it was the red light was pointed right at me. So you watch Collision. Right about when this episode ends, right? We're doing it 6:30 Eastern time, just about, when we finish up here, maybe a little bit later. That's when Collision's going to air. So I'm going to watch intently and see if I can see yours truly on the screen. So that'd be
When I
awesome.
get back to it tomorrow, most likely, I will definitely be keeping an eye out and with the phone ready to rewind and say, I got you.
The reactions from me were a little bit mild, so don't, I know you won't, but for those listening and watching, don't come at me when you don't see me going ballistic for a flaming table spot. I was just sitting there, I was enjoying myself, but no, it was a really cool event. AEW did a good job, and that was my first ever AEW show too, so I loved
Nice.
it. It
Glad you
was good.
had fun, bro.
Yeah, but now to the hockey. We
Yes,
got
now on to the
trade
so
deadline recap,
yeah,
right?
so extended intro done. So there was in fact the NHL trade deadline yesterday, Liam.
Uh-huh.
But before that,
A lot of teams got
of
better.
course, we record on Tuesday earlier this week, and what happens? Wednesday, the trades start breaking again because, of course, they do. Why would we have any luck whatsoever like that? And the first trade that's announced after we record on Tuesday, aka, well, Wednesday when everything started to go ballistic again. Vladimir Tarasenko has been acquired by the Florida Panthers from the Ottawa Senators in exchange for a conditional 2024 fourth round pick and a 2025 third round pick. The condition on the pick saying it becomes a 2026 third if Florida wins the cup this year. So basically, why the return was so low on this trade was Tarasenko signed with Ottawa in the offseason with either a no move or a no trade clause, and Florida was the only team he was willing to go to. Ottawa had no leverage, hence the return. Great pickup. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, it's a poor bit of business for me from the Ottawa Senators, and kind of inherited the situation, in the middle of the offseason after, their change up within their upper management. But this is why you don't sign players to a 1 year deal with, a no trade clause or even a modified no trade clause. Because if things go sideways and, usually, off-season winners, typically their regular season goes sideways. And that's why before the season, I looked at Ottawa and I was like, wow, a team that made a lot of improvements. They brought in Korpisalo in goal, Tarasenko as well. They're a surefire playoff team. No, no, they're not. And they really locked themselves in there and they struggled. They needed to give up the asset and to only walk away with a second and a fourth round pick while retaining 50% for a player on a 1 year deal. Uh, yeah, that's a bad bit of business. But again, they did as much with what they had for me.
A
And
third and a fourth round pick.
really, I mean,
Even yeah, even
for
worse.
Florida, you add a top line winger to an already loaded forward group. It's a no brainer from Bill Zito. Let me tell you, Bill Zito keeps making banger after banger after banger of trades. You go back to the Huberdeau trade, you go back to, even shipping out, Uyghur and bringing back Chuck and, leading the Panthers to the Stanley Cup final. And, a really, really nice deal here as well from Zito. So Panthers clearly win this. And if they go on and win a Stanley Cup, you can look back at this trade and, see that they didn't give up a lot of assets for huge, huge results. By the way, Tarasenko, as we're recording on Hat Trick Watch tonight, already 2 goals in his first game at home as a Panther. So.
I did in fact see that right before we started recording, but great trade for Florida.
Yeah, indeed. And for Ottawa, you kind of reset in the offseason and now when you're trying to bring guys in on 1 year deals, that's a no-no, a no trade clause or even a modified one. So
That should have been obvious from the beginning, but yeah, some NHL teams just don't know what they're doing.
I didn't mean to call you out there, by the way, when saying that's why you don't pin Ottawa for the playoffs after having a good offseason. I know you
Oh no,
did.
I was internally taking the L there. Trust
Yeah,
me.
hey, we all have those. I said that Boston was going to be at the bottom of the Atlantic, so hey, I'll put on my con makeup too. Go back and watch that episode.
I might have had them missing the playoffs also, so we might both be taking the L on that one.
Right, but Ottawa need improvements. That's all.
Yes. Yeah, seriously. So we go from that to Bowen Byram of the of the formerly of the Buffalo Sabres getting traded to the Colorado Avalanche from the oh Jesus Christ, I cannot talk today.
Now
So
we have
basically
Bowen Byram traded from the Colorado Avalanche to the Buffalo Sabres. There you go. I got your shades.
in
In exchange.
exchange for Casey Middlestadt.
Yep, there you go.
Thank you, sir. I thank you. God, that
You
was
were,
bad.
yeah, but you got to keep it in though. just like you keep my sneezes in, you got to keep that in.
100%, 100%.
But a quick recap on this trade. I mean, it's an interesting one for sure, right? You have
Oh
Bowen
yeah.
Byram, really, really good for the Abs and their playoff run there when he just entered the league. Very similar to
Oh yeah.
the impact Cale Makar had when he first entered the NHL. Different type of players. Disclaimer. But again, like that offensive ability, that's really, really good to see out of a player that's drafted within the top five of their respective year. So look, Byram for Middlestadt. Middlestadt was an underperforming top 10 pick for a couple of years there. But in the last few, he's really developed into an outstanding two-way center, and he's been able to produce and kind of fortify himself as pretty good playmaker. So I like the deal. I was intrigued by it. I think that Buffalo probably ends up on the better end. I mean, they're starting to build a blue line here of Owen Power, Rasmus Dahlin, and now you bring in Byram to go in alongside you.
Oh
You
yeah.
have a couple of other pieces there that are intriguing as well. So for me, I like this trade for each team. And again, Colorado just continues to load up in their pursuit of a cup. So one team gets younger and brings more offensive promise to their blue line, while the other gets a top six center to help lead them into the playoffs. So
Yep. Like you
and
said,
still a player with upside in Middlestat too, might I add.
oh yeah. No, like you said, this is a good trade for both teams, and I thought it was absolutely hilarious when Byram debuted for Buffalo and he's on the power play where he looks good and he's like getting confused that everybody's standing around. And he just goes, "Yep, that's the difference between a good and a bad coached power play."
Yeah, I saw that video too on X. That was interesting.
Pretty funny. But I think both short term and long term, this could work out for both teams.
Certainly. I like the move by Kevin Adams specifically for
Oh yeah.
Buffalo. That's off to you. And Colorado has made good moves ever since they've become a contender. So,
Oh yeah.
not surprising there.
No, not at all. Now, Liam, we have another three-team trade because, and I'm pretty sure this one was also a three-team trade, but I'm not gonna list all that out again. So basically, the
Please
trade
don't.
involves Edmonton, the trade involves Anaheim, and the trade involves Tampa Bay. Long story short, Adam Henrique and Sam Carrick are both acquired by the Oilers. Their salary retention from Anaheim also with Tampa Bay in getting Adam Henrique to the Oilers. So basically, Tampa Bay picked up a fourth round conditional pick, and Anaheim picked up a first and a fifth, while the Oilers get Sam Carrick and Adam Henrique, along with the signing rights to Ty Taylor. And a seventh round pick, because why not just throw another seventh round pick in there? So
Sure.
what this boils down to is Anaheim is getting, excuse me, Anaheim, dear Lord, excuse me, Edmonton, Jesus, is getting Sam Carrick and Adam Henrique both at retained cap hits. And this is a team that needs depth, needed depth. We saw it in the playoffs last year when they finally went up against Vegas and just got killed. Uh, I like the acquisitions by Edmonton on this trade. I do not necessarily like what they had to give up to get both of them, but so it's a little bit of a double-edged sword here, but there's both good and bad for Edmonton in this trade. What are your thoughts?
I think the problem is with this deal is not the deal itself. And, we'll get to it by the end of the episode, so I won't give up too much. But at the end of the trade deadline, I don't think Edmonton is any further up the ladder than they were before the trade deadline in the Western Conference. I just don't. This just doesn't move the needle for me. I like Henrique. It's good to have experience down the middle. And hey, when you're operating at all cylinders, you're able to have McDavid, Draisaitl, and now Adam Henrique as your top three centers. That's a really nice luxury to have. And then you add Sam Carrick as well, who's not a bad player in his own right. You get them both at salary, at cap hit retention. But yeah, they have to give up a first round pick to do it. Probably a late first round pick, depending. I think they're anticipating that they get pretty far in the Stanley Cup playoffs, and that pick is somewhere between 28, and the lower 30s. So for me, I don't hate the deal, but it's not a needle mover, especially with some of the other moves that the Western Conference has had. But hey, you never know. Teams just sneak up. come playoff time. And, they have really nice extended runs. And Edmonton hasn't had that with Connor McDavid and, Leon Draisaitl at the helm there. And maybe this is the year. Their goaltending just has to stand up. And once again, they didn't address that. I'm not saying it was a dire need, but it's another trade deadline where you do not assess the goaltending. And, it very well could be their downfall by the time they get eliminated, if they do. So it's very interesting. I'm not going to write off Edmonton, but I don't think they're any further up the ladder than they were before the deadline started.
I agree with you. And there's actually a very weird condition on the draft pick that Edmonton gave Tampa Bay in this trade. It right now it's a 2025 fourth, or excuse me, yeah, conditional, and then it becomes a 2026 fourth if Edmonton wins the cup. I don't think I've ever seen a draft pick get moved back. Well, a mid to later round pick get moved back if a team wins. It's usually the opposite with the later round picks.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, that's a weird one.
Too many.
But for Anaheim, they at worst this turns into a first and a fourth. I mean, at worst it turns into a first and a fifth. At best it turns into a first and a fourth. So, I mean, Carrick and Henrique getting rid of both of them for a first and a fifth, I would say they got pretty good value back, if not great value.
There was a time where Henrique didn't really have a spot, right?
Yeah,
And he kind of had to play himself into that top six center role. And he did. And he earned, every single bit of time that he got as a top line center for the Ducks. But the Ducks move on from him. Clearly a rebuilding team. They got a first round pick and another draft pick in return. It's a no-brainer. And Anaheim continues on with their rebuild. They got a nice little thing going on there too, with Cutter Gauthier and Mason McTavish and Trevor Zegras. There's a really good forward core there, and maybe
Leo Carlson.
Leo Carlson as well. Maybe you use, a first round pick this year, that the Oilers give you in exchange for Adam Henrique and Sam Carrick, and you get yourself a blue liner, and you continue to build from there. So,
But I would agree with you. This doesn't move Edmonton any closer to being a cup contender.
no, it doesn't. Their goaltending still has to stand up. That's been the question all along, and that remains the question.
Exactly.
It's been better. It's been better, but the playoffs are a different beast.
100%. Now we move on to yet another three-team trade because I absolutely hate NHL GMs the last 2 years. Long story short, the Vegas Golden Knights have acquired Noah Hanifin from the Calgary Flames at 75% cap retention, with Philly being the initial cap hit retainer. And Philly gets a fifth round pick out of this year from Vegas. Vegas also gets the signing rights to Mikhail Vorobayev. I like that name. And in return, Calgary gets from Vegas Daniil Miramanov, a 2024 conditional third round pick, and a conditional 2026 first round pick. The conditions on the third rounder being it upgrades to a second if Vegas wins a playoff round this year, which is looking very likely. And the conditions on the first round pick, if traded by March 10th, 2024, or if the pick is top 10, Calgary will instead receive the 2026 first round pick from Vegas. So at worst, this is a first and a third round pick.
Yeah, for me, I like this deal a lot for the Golden Knights. The fact that you're able to get Hanifin at 75% retained, I mean, he was probably the number one defenseman available at the deadline this year, right?
He may have been, yeah.
He was already at a decent cap hit to begin with, and you trade for him, and you give up Miramanov, who, again, I was with the Ghost Pirates last year. He never did get any time in Savannah, but he spent a very, very good amount of time with the Henderson Silver Knights. He's a defenseman that had 22 points in 31 games in the American Hockey League, so he's right on the precipice of becoming an NHL defenseman, a mainstay. And again, for the Flames, kind of where they are at as an organization, those are the players that you need, and you bring in a first-round pick. And let me tell you, that's an unprotected first-round pick in 2026 for Vegas. The NHL can change a lot year to year. And for me, that pick is far enough away. And Vegas is enough of a tumultuous situation. They're great right now, coming off of a Stanley Cup win. They're looking primed and ready for another one. But there's some questions there. Jack Eichel's health, I mean, that hasn't really been a question in a few years. But Mark Stone has a lacerated spleen. You don't really know what their cap situation looks like. There's a couple other big name players that they bring in as well that we'll talk about later in the episode. That's a sneaky, sneaky nice acquisition for Calgary. That 2026 first round pick. Circle that.
Oh
because
yeah.
Vegas didn't want to give up their pick this year. You know why? Because the draft's at the Sphere, so they want to have a pick in their home city there. So very, very interesting situation. Great deal by the Flames. Hanifin was a player that, again, really didn't have a home, right? When he went to Calgary from Carolina and he goes to Calgary, he becomes a top 4D man. The Flames are not in the playoff race. They get 2 picks and a top end prospect, defensive prospect. Yeah, I really like the deal for the Flames. Really, really nice trade.
Yeah, good acquisition by the Knights, great return value for the Flames, 100%.
And if you're going to make that deal, you have to get Hanifin at 75%. So that's where I like the deal for the Golden Knights. If you're
Yeah.
giving up that asset,
Jeez. Hey.
you need to pay nearly nothing for it. So
All right. Hold on
is
one second.
all right.
And that brings us to the Joel Edmundson trade getting traded from the Washington Capitals to the Toronto Maple Leafs at 50% salary cap retention. In exchange, the Capitals get a third and fifth in this year and next year's draft, respectively. That's Washington did all right in this trade with a return, and the Leafs acquire a defenseman that they kind of need. So good on them.
That's a pretty big overpayment for me. A third and a fifth round pick. You just saw Tarasenko go for a third and a fourth, right?
Yeah, pretty much. But they also had no leverage, Ottawa.
I know, but still, you see Rui'll go for a fourth, and we'll talk about Rui'll. I think he's a better defenseman.
Seventh.
Uh, I'm sorry,
He went for a seventh, but we'll get back to that.
Rui'll didn't go for a seventh. He went for a fourth.
I thought it
He
was a seven. Anyway, we'll get back to that.
Anyway, but yeah, I don't like the deal for the Maple Leafs. I think they gave up a little bit too much. But for Washington, again, you trade away a depth defenseman, you get a third and a fifth. That's a nice, nice, nice return. I like that.
Yeah, same. And the Maple Leafs acquiring a defenseman at the deadline. That's always going to be interesting. How that one turns out.
Yeah, we'll see. We'll see. Come April, in about a month here.
You'll see indeed. And you're right, it was a fourth. I mixed up my numbers there.
Yeah, I was like a seventh. I would have been doing cartwheels.
Yeah, I mixed up my numbers there. Oh well.
But yeah, again, kind of a nothing trade there. Again, we'll see how it turns out for the Maple Leafs, but better return for Washington than a get for Toronto, in my opinion. So
Yeah, 100%. Now the Maple Leafs also acquired Troy Stetcher from the Coyotes in exchange for basically a 2027 fourth. And Ottawa, excuse me, Edmonton acquires a seventh round pick back this year. So yeah, they got another player.
yep.
That's all I have to say about that.
I've always liked Stetcher, so maybe he'll find a home there. So
Yeah, Edmonton loaded up a little bit, so they're trying to make a run. We'll see what happens.
they are kind of like the Rangers, right? Marginal moves. I mean, Henrique is that's a bigger move than what the Rangers did, but just trying to kind of shore up different areas of their team where they need them. So
Oh yeah. Now, on to the Colorado Avalanche, where we actually have two trades to talk about. First one, Brandon Duhaime, coming in from the Minnesota Wild in exchange for a 2026 third round pick, and Yakov Trenin, acquired by the Nashville Predators, along with the signing rights to Graham Sword, which is basically sword without the O and A instead. And they give up Jeremy Hansel and a 2025 third round pick. So two third round picks and Hansel in exchange for Trenin, Duhaime, and the signing rights to Sword. These are two solid pickups by Colorado.
yeah, I like Duhaime a lot. Played over at Providence. Had some AHL experience and has really kind of bursted onto the scene with Minnesota. 17 points in 80 games. He brings that physicality aspect too. A good amount of penalty minutes in Colorado. Again, maybe it's an area of their club that they felt like they needed to patch up a little bit, that physicality, and they do that. I love Trenin as well. So again, Colorado just continues to make excellent, excellent moves, and that's kind of been their MO for their front office for the last few years now. So, marginal moves, but for me, again, when you're acquiring those depth guys, they got to be the right ones if you're going to make a run in the playoffs. And I feel like Colorado, with all of their moves, kind of has done that. So,
Yeah, and Trenin is also a bottom six penalty killer, so you can never go wrong with those.
yep.
Who plays a tough style. Next up, we got Anthony Beauvillier getting acquired by the Predators from the Blackhawks in exchange for a 2024 fifth round pick. This is a player that Barry Trotz was familiar with in his time with the Islanders, and Beauvillier, he never really lived up to the hype that came around him coming out of the draft. But I mean, for a fifth round pick, you can't go wrong for a player with his skill set.
Yeah, I like Beauvillier a lot. And I think now he gets to go over to Nashville. And he has an opportunity to kind of make his mark over there. So
Yeah, I mean, time Nashville's had a little bit of a weird deadline, but
yeah.
Beauvillier is a nice pickup for a fifth round pick.
Mhm.
And before we, have to slice it up and cut so I have to edit. Tampa Bay Lightning have acquired Anthony Duclair from the Sharks, along with a 2025 seventh round pick, in exchange for a 2024 third round pick and Jack Thompson, who is not currently signed. So basically, the Sharks got a third round pick in exchange for Duclair.
Yeah, again, Duclair was kind of one of those names that was out there as one of the best top six forwards available at the deadline. And San Jose moves him. I think they probably would have liked a little bit better of a return than a third round pick. But again, you could say what you want.
That's a foreshadow to something we'll get back to.
Yeah, but yeah, third round pick I think is yeah, I think
That's
they would have
I mean, that's a little
like
rich for me for Duclair, just my opinion.
if Duclair was available for a third round pick, I would have done it if I were Drury. See if he just works on the right side, you know, like you said Gabranson, right? From Washington to Toronto. Was it
Uh,
Gabranson?
Washington. Was it Goodbranson or was it Gustafson?
I don't know. There's too many Gustafsons.
Yeah,
Uh,
Gustafson. Anyway,
Gustafson. But my point is, it's a third and a fifth round pick in that trade. For Duclair, I wouldn't have mind giving up a third round pick. So
yeah, I guess so. But the Lightning acquired Duclair, and well, they're just trying to get back out of the first round,
that's
because
another thing.
after
Look,
making the final 3 years in a row.
when you have skilled players like the Lightning do, even if Duclair's not having the best season, you just throw him out there. With Stamkos, hey, maybe it works. Maybe it's lightning in a bottle, and then a player that, may have went for a third round pick provides first round pick value to your team. So I think maybe that's what Tampa Bay is looking for. So
Yeah, maybe. And there was surprisingly no salary retention on this one for a third round pick. So, I mean, we'll see how that works out for the Lightning.
yeah, we will. Absolutely.
Next up, we have the biggest fish of the trade deadline, along with another trade by the same team. Jake Guentzel, acquired by the Carolina Hurricanes, because God damn it, of course it would be another Metro team, along with Ty Smith in exchange for forward Michael Bunting, prospects Vasily Ponomarev, Cruz Lucius, great name, and Vili Koivunen, as along with two 2024 draft picks, second round pick, and fifth round pick that are both conditional. The condition being it's a first round pick if Carolina makes it to the Stanley Cup final. Not looking likely, but never say never. And the fifth round pick is transferred only if Carolina wins the cup. So at worst, this is a second. At best, it's a first and a fifth.
Yeah, there were a lot of conversations surrounding Jake Guentzel all the way up to the trade deadline. Even our beloved New York Rangers were in the conversation, which was nice. And again, I didn't really think it mattered to Kyle Dubas, the general manager of the Penguins, where he traded him, right? It didn't matter whether it was Western Conference or Eastern Conference. He just wanted the best return. And look, Vancouver, who was probably their most logical trading partner. They kind of went all in with Elias Lindholm, and you kind of can't backtrack on a player that you just acquired just because you like a flashier one that might be available. So it was really those two Metro teams and the Panthers, I guess you could say, were involved to an extent, but it was really Carolina, the Rangers, Florida, and maybe Vegas, as well. But hey, the Hurricanes are the team that walk away with the biggest fish at the trade deadline. They give up three prospects. Let me tell you, every single one of those prospects better than Gabe Perreault, and better than Brennan Othman.
That's
So
not what I've been hearing.
I I think Ranger fans tend to overrate their prospects a little bit. I'm not saying that either of those prospects are bad. I love Othman and I love Sikora and I love Perot and I love all of those guys. But you got to look at this system for Carolina and the Rangers. They're just not the same. And the depth that they have, if I'm Kyle Dubas, I would have taken Carolina's package every single day of the week based on 3 players they got. And look, it's disappointing that they don't walk away with a surefire first round pick. It's disappointing, 100%. But when you walk away with the 3 players that they did, those are players that all 3 of them have an opportunity to make an impact at the NHL level in the next 2 years. And that's what Pittsburgh needs, right? They don't want draft picks that's going to take 4 or 5 years for them to develop. They want Sidney Crosby to have that next wave of players. Give him one last chance for a Stanley Cup with Malkin and Letang and Carlson because there are some contracts on that team that are just unmovable. And you have to, get yourself in a place to where you can contend. And for me, I would rather get 3 prospects that are on the precipice of making their way to the NHL than go for 2 prospects from the Rangers. Oh, Othman maybe not that far away, but you don't know. You never know with any prospect. But for me, I think Kyle Dubas took the best package that was out there. And that's even as a Ranger fan that desperately, desperately wanted Guentzel.
Yeah, one of the prospect people on Twitter, I forgot who it was, but he had these 3 specific prospects ranked no higher than sixth. I think it was sixth, seventh, and either eighth or ninth. That was where he had them just within Carolina's organization, which if he's ranking these 3 that low, I would love to know what the top 5 prospects are if they actually went to a trade like this.
And maybe Pittsburgh, Dubas kind of saw that, hey, maybe either I get a top end prospect and a first round pick, or I can get a pick that has the potential to be a first rounder if Jake Guentzel provides the impact that, everybody thinks he will to this Hurricanes team.
Oh yeah,
And then on top of that, you're able to add in prospects that again are able to help relatively soon. That's why I think they like the deal. But let me tell you, the best player in this trade is
Jake
Jake
Guentzel.
Guentzel. And when, I think I texted somebody this, I'm not sure if it was you. It was you and Brendan. Going back a couple of years ago, that first round series between the Rangers and the Penguins that won 7 games. Rangers won, but Jake Guentzel was the best player in that series.
8 goals.
Hands down, the best player in that series. I was there for one of the games and he was unbelievable. That was just game one.
Oh, that was
Even
the triple overtime game.
yeah, and even after the fact, I even had to remark after the series was over, after Panarin had scored the OT winner, like that was fun. So glad that we're moving on.
Yeah.
Probably shouldn't have won the series, and Jake Guentzel was the best player in a series that included Igor Shesterkin, Chris Letang, Evgeny Malkin, Sidney Crosby, Mika Zibanejad, Chris Kreider off of a 50-goal season, Artemi Panarin. He was the best player. So Carolina, they get infinitely better by this acquisition. And for me, you give up whatever you have to. And let me just say this. I'm sure we'll go back to the Rangers later on in the episode,
Oh, we
but
will.
I wasn't really that big of a fan of sending players like Perot or Othman and Kako to Pittsburgh. Because you know what happens? The playoffs are such a crapshoot. You get eliminated in round 2. You don't re-sign Guentzel. He walks to Pittsburgh. And guess what? Pittsburgh has Guentzel, Kako, Othman, Perot, and your first round pick. And you're fucked. Sorry, pardon my language. So I
This is
wasn't
Pucks and Brews. You never have to pardon your language with saying fuck.
I
Fuck!
wa- I wasn't really I wasn't really a fan of doing that. So it wasn't the worst news to me when I found out he was going to be going elsewhere. But like you said at the beginning of your point, the fact that he goes to Carolina stings.
100%. And to stick with the Carolina Hurricanes for a second, while they did get the biggest fish in the Jesus Christ, in the trade deadline pool or pond, like I said, my brain scrambled eggs. It's going to
Just
continue to
go
be
with it.
scrambled
Just
eggs.
go.
Just go
Well
with
spent.
it. They also acquire Evgeny Kuznetsov, who we forgot to mention last episode was put on waivers a day after clearing the player assistance program by the Capitals. And in exchange, the Capitals receive a 2025 third round pick. So Carolina adds 2 big name players, and they do get both of them at cap retention. Guentzel is coming in at $1.5 million retained by Pittsburgh, and the Capitals are withholding 50% of Evgeny Kuznetsov's cap hit, getting him at looks like 2.7, excuse me, 3.9 million. So They add two big names, and frankly, I don't think I don't think they gave up as much as they should have for these two players. That's just my opinion.
I mean, if the cost for Evgeny Kuznetsov at 50% cap retention was a third round pick,
You do that any day.
I think you do that any day, but I think that there was probably more to the situation. And look at the Carolina Hurricanes, right? Don Waddell has no hesitation in bringing in players that have checkered pasts. Brings in Tony DeAngelo, wants to give him a second chance. Tony DeAngelo is not a top six defender in this league anymore.
No.
Evgeny Kuznetsov has had his issues. And I'll just leave it at that. And that's why he was in the players assistance program, and hopefully he is better on the other side for it. But let me tell you, I think Washington sending him down to Hershey, putting him on waivers, is a clear indication that he might not be past his issues full throttle. And for me, a playoff team and a locker room that Rod Brindamore has that's as tight knit and well put together and well rounded, that's a risk. That's a risk. He is as talented of a centerman as they come in the NHL. I mean, he is right up there when he's, at his best. But I think there's something to say about disrupting the locker room. And I think that's kind of one of the things that Carolina prides themselves on. You
Mhm.
know, they are a structured, well-behaved group. And I just, Kuznetsov just better be on his best behavior, if Carolina wants to go in their pursuit of a Stanley Cup. I think this is a move that has the potential to hurt more than it helps. And I think when you see a guy get brought in at 50% cap retention for as low, of a rate that he came for, right, for a third round pick, I think it's, I'm just keeping an eye on it. Just putting that out there. Just
To
keeping an eye.
piggyback off of that, his cap hit without the retention would have been
7-8, right?
7.8. And based on him clearing waivers and going to the AHL, it was very clear no team was going to trade for him at a full cap hit. So
Right.
the fact that they got a third round pick, that's kind of what they were going to get at this point, if that's what they got.
But hey, with everything I just said, Shades, Kuznetsov looked great today in the Hurricanes win over the Devils. He was impactful in all three zones. So if he can be that type of player, they bring in Guentzel and they bring in Kuznetsov. If everything just stays put in the locker room and they get solid enough goaltending, I don't really think there's a lot of aspects of their game holding the Carolina Hurricanes back from winning a Stanley Cup. Like they're dangerous.
Yeah, hey, Kuznetsov, Guentzel, and Ty Smith, who didn't work out with the Devils or the Penguins. And in exchange, they get three draft picks, three prospects, and a roster player. I mean, excuse me, not in exchange. That's what they gave up. But that's for those two players, both at cap retention. I think the Hurricanes did pretty good.
Yep. Yep. We'll see. We'll see how it works out for them.
Yep, we'll see how it works out indeed. Speaking of seeing if it works out, the Columbus Blue Jackets acquired Malcolm Subban in exchange from the St. Louis Blues in exchange for future considerations. May we have a moment of silence for the future considerations? Thank you. And I've been waiting all episode to bring that trade up, but yeah, that happened. Absolutely love it.
No notes. No notes. Just
No
silence.
notes, no need. Just needed to
Yeah.
be mentioned.
Just silence.
Now, moving on to an actual trade. The Florida Panthers acquire Kyle Okposo from the Buffalo Sabres, which I was very surprised Okposo was on the move here. In exchange for Callie Shallon, or Kale Shallon, I think it's Callie, and a 2024 conditional seventh round pick, which will upgrade to a fifth round pick this year if Florida wins the Cup this year. So basically, an older player, veteran presence, former captain, good locker room guy the Panthers are getting. And I honestly, even though Okposo was an Islander, I'm rooting for him.
You can't underestimate how important leadership is come the Stanley Cup playoffs. And again, Bill Zito, just in a flurry of excellent moves, just continues with another one here. I'm a little bit surprised that Buffalo's Kevin Adams gave up on Okposo. Their captain, kind of what does that say to the room? I know they're not really in a playoff spot, but hey, maybe this is the organization trying to turn a new leaf Hopefully they'll announce a new captain in the offseason. Maybe that guy is Alex Tuck, who's native to the area. But so for Buffalo, it's tough to get rid of a player like Okposo. But again, you sent him to Florida, a place where he has a chance to go and win a Stanley Cup for the first time in his career. And I think that's doing right by the player. And at this point, at a time in Kyle Okposo's career where he's only got what, probably, a few years left, probably 3 to 4 seasons at most, you give him an opportunity on a stacked Panthers team and an opportunity to make an impact. I don't think that Okposo is just going to be there to ride the press box. I think he's going to be on the bench. I think he's going to be an important factor to the Panthers' pursuit of a cup.
Yep, 100%.
Yeah. And, the draft,
Crapshoot.
compensation give back is nothing. So,
No, crapshoot. Onto an underrated move of the deadline. The Winnipeg Jets acquire Tyler Toffoli from the Devils in exchange for a second round pick next year and a third round pick this year. That's a great sneaky pickup okay, not a sneaky pickup, but that's great value that they got in exchange for Toffoli.
yeah, I'm not really too surprised that Toffoli didn't work out in New Jersey. I think everybody just flipped out in the offseason when Toffoli got moved there and thought that, they're going to catch lightning in a bottle playing with Jack Hughes, the top six, Nico Hischier, Jesper Bratt, all of those guys. It hasn't really worked out. The Devils with their own issues firing their head coach, but that's a conversation for another day. I think we talked about that last episode already.
He did.
But again, Winnipeg adds a top six scorer into Toffoli and a guy, again, who knows that division, right? I mean, he was so good with Calgary when he was there, probably one of the best years of his career. So again, he heads back, and gives an opportunity to a Jets team that could use some help up front with the injuries that they've had. So I think he's going to be a valued addition, and I think it was very telling that Tom Fitzgerald traded away Tyler Toffoli. I don't want to say that's throwing the white flag, but hey, like Toffoli was going to be one of those pieces that were going to help you come playoff time. And if you're willingly trading him away, I think you're kind of sending the message to your team and your fans. Maybe this year's not the year. So intriguing on many, many levels, but a good pickup for Winnipeg.
Yeah, and I just realized that he was on 50% salary retention in this trade, and they could only get a second and third round pick New Jersey. That's a great move by Winnipeg.
Right, exactly. And again, the market was set, right? I don't think you saw a forward outside of your, top guns that went for a first round pick. I know we'll get to him, but Hurdle goes for a first round pick and Guentzel goes, potentially for a first round pick, not even a confirmed one. So the market was really set despite the situation with Tarasenko. And hey, good on Winnipeg for jumping on a player like Toffoli and getting him for 2 draft picks. That again, better draft picks than what we've been talking about, but still a crapshoot nonetheless.
Yep, 100%. In a weird little move, the Coyotes traded Jason Zucker to the Predators in exchange for a sixth round pick this year. I was surprised Zucker didn't go to another team, but Nashville is somehow in the playoffs as of right now with the incredibly bad on paper forward group that they have. Nothing against Ryan O'Reilly and Gus Nyquist, but you look at their forward group on paper and it's just not very good to the eyesight. But hey, 5.3 million, sixth round pick. I personally thought he would have garnered at least a fourth, maybe even a third, depending on the team. But I would say this is a sneaky good pickup for the Nashville Predators for what they gave up.
Yeah, again, I think it's one of those moves, right, where I think everybody knows where the Predators are as an organization. They're rebuilding, they're retooling, they're getting younger. But at the same time, when you're close to the playoffs and you have an opportunity to maybe jump back into the race a little bit and you see a player that has experience, has shown that he could score goals before, again, specifically in the division, right, with Minnesota earlier in his career. Arizona, he's had some tough seasons over there. But remember, before that, he was a big time player with the Pittsburgh Penguins, when they wanted to kind of rekindle their cup chances. So I don't hate the move either, and this keeps Nashville relevant, in a Western Conference playoff picture that they're still in. So
Yep, 100%. And honestly, we talked about it. Nashville didn't really make any big splashes or anything like we probably were anticipating them to, but we also probably should have saw this coming in hindsight with where
right,
they are.
yeah,
But
for
sneaky good
Arizona,
pickup.
yeah, you have to trade away Zucker if you're Arizona. So
Yeah, you have to get literally anything for anybody if you're Arizona right now.
definitely.
The Boston Bruins picked up Pat Maroon from the Minnesota Wild because that's actually in terms of the style that Pat Maroon plays, that's a great pickup for Boston because he would fit there in a heartbeat in exchange for Luke Toporowski and a 2026 conditional sixth round pick, where the pick is only transferred if Minnesota if Maroon plays one playoff game this year. So that with the Wild, that's not looking likely. So they got Pat Maroon for next to nothing.
Yeah, I like Maroon a lot. Again, like you talk about a player that has had a massive impact on Stanley Cup winning teams, especially with the Tampa Bay Lightning. Maroon comes right to the top of that list. So good for Boston. Again, like I don't really hate teams, going for minimal moves, when they don't really know whether it's their year or not, kind of what the Rangers did, and that's what the Bruins do as well. So
Yeah, Boston would also go on to acquire Andrew Peeke from the Blue Jackets in exchange for a 2027 third round pick and Jacob Zaboral, who, if I remember correctly, was one of Boston's three consecutive first round picks in 2015 that did not work out.
yes, yes, he was. So I like
So
Pete.
yeah,
He's a good defenseman. So again, he helps.
yeah, they're loading. This is two depth moves for them, but that's all I have to say about that.
Me
And
too.
moving on to two trades with the Philadelphia Flyers. First off, they acquire Erik Johnson from the Buffalo Sabres in exchange for a fourth round pick this year. And they also acquire Denis Gurianov from the Nashville Predators in exchange for Wade Allison. So Erik Johnson coming over from the Sabres, that's a good pickup by them. Former Stanley Cup champion with the Avalanche, former first overall pick, great locker room guy. Philadelphia could have used a guy like this on their back end who have Philly in general has been making a lot of good moves lately, and I hate it because they're one of the teams I hate, but I also can't hate on good moves. And Denis Gurianov, who was a member of the Stars when they went on their Cup final run a few years back. So in my opinion, this is even though he's fallen off, this is two quality, solid additions to for the Flyers.
So many teams in weird spots, and I think the Flyers are certainly one of them. Never a bad thing to take a flyer on a player like Gurianov, who's been a proven scorer in the AHL. And again, when there's opportunity within a team's top six, you like to reward players, who might have an impact, with that chance. And I think that's what Philly's doing. So
100%. I just two good moves by them. And to a trade where I honestly laughed at this when it happened, the New Jersey Devils acquired Jake Allen at a 50% salary cap retention from the Montreal Canadiens in exchange for a conditional 2025 third round pick, where it upgrades to a second if Allen plays in 40 or more games by the end of next season, and if the club that Allen is a member of qualifies for the playoffs next year. So they have so basically two conditions need to be met at the same time for this to turn into a second. I don't see. Well, actually, yeah, New Jersey could possibly make the playoffs next year, depending on what happens. But at worst, this is a third round pick. What are your thoughts on this? Because I don't know. I thought there was better fish available in the sea, and they went with one of the lower end ones for who was available.
yeah, I've always liked Allen, to be honest. I always ask, right, is this goaltender going to win me a Stanley Cup? And I think Allen, he could get hot enough to where he could lead New Jersey on a nice run. But I think when you look at the goaltending options, right, whether it was Saros or whether it was Jacob Markstrom, I think just the price was a little bit too rich. And when you see your top players this trade deadline, not even going for a first round pick. So if you see Jake Guentzel go for a second round pick and three prospects, why would you turn to Calgary and say, yeah, I'll give you a first round pick for Jacob Markstrom? So, I think that's kind of might have been New Jersey's thinking there. So, um, I don't hate the pickup. I don't.
Yeah, no, I probably should kind of take back what I said on the lower end side. He was probably the fourth best goalie available
He's
for,
kind of been hiding over there in Montreal. And it's Sam Montembeau's net now. He has kind of taken over for the Canadiens. So again, that's another situation, right, where where the team does right by the player. And for Montreal, you give Jake Allen a fresh start in New Jersey. And again, I'm excited to see what he's able to do, even though he's on arrival. So
same. And the second move that New Jersey made also involving goaltending, they trade away Vitek Vanacek to the Sharks along with the 2025 seventh round pick in exchange for Kaapo Kähkönen. I literally looked at this and went, this is two underachieving goalies this season, and New Jersey was just trying to switch up their goaltending situation, and if that was what they were looking to accomplish, they did just that.
I have always liked Kaapo Kähkönen. But you have an opportunity in San Jose, right, to become the number one guy, and Mackenzie Blackwood kind of beat you out, former Devil, ironically, right? Vanacek just keeps getting moved around like every couple of years. I like Vanacek, but he's not a number one in the league. Um, yeah, I think this is just a change of scenery situation for both teams. So
Yeah, hey, and like I just said, New Jersey revamped their current goaltending situation, which is something that was kind of desperately needed for them.
and now you could allow legitimate development for Nico Daws and Akira Schmid in the AHL, and you can keep two goaltenders who have been in the NHL pretty consistently throughout their careers, in Kakinen, and Jake Allen, as the 1 and 2 in the crease. So
Yep, 100%. Back to the Lightning, Matt Dumba is acquired by the Lightning from the Coyotes along with a 2025 seventh in exchange for a 2027 fifth. So they get Dumba at the full $3.9 million cap hit, shore up their back end, which was low key a need by them. Good pickup by Tampa. I hate that they had to give up almost nothing for him. They basically pick swapped late round picks, but I don't hate the addition by the Lightning.
Dumba's a good defenseman.
Yep.
But again, he's aging, he's getting a little bit older. And again, Tampa Bay not really going all in, but adding smaller pieces to try and see if that's what makes the puzzle fit. So again, I really don't hate the mentality. I like Dumba a lot, and to be able to get him for a mid-round pick, I think is a win if you're Tampa Bay. So
Yep, 100%. Now on to, I'm gonna skip ahead and come back for a second. The Winnipeg Jets made another sneaky good move. They acquired Colin Miller from the Devils in exchange for a 2026 fourth. Colin Miller was a player with a little bit good upside when he was originally with the Sabres, I believe. And to get him for a fourth round pick at his current cap hit, that's another sneaky good move by the Jets.
yeah, again, another depth defenseman. And the Jets bring him in, for not too much of a return. So again, I feel like these moves all jumbled together, right? All these depth pieces for mid-round picks. Pretty much will say the same thing. It's just, again, you're getting good value, and you're not giving up a ton. So again, another good addition for Winnipeg.
Yep, exactly. Speaking of good additions, when I heard this might be a possibility of a trade, I was on the live stream yesterday with Chirp and Chat, and I saw this on Twitter and just went, whoa, whoa, hold on, hold on, hold on. And
All right.
my co-hosts were like, what? And I just said Tomas Hertl might be going to the Vegas Golden Knights. And they're just like, are you kidding me? And then a couple of minutes later, I saw a great tweet 200 seconds before the NHL, or excuse me, like 10 minutes before the NHL trade deadline with the Vegas Golden Knights Undertaker gif, which that is basically a perfect summarization of the Vegas Golden Knights because they pull off yet another trade involving a high profile name, this time in Tomas Hertl, where they acquire him, a 2025 third round pick, and a 2027 third round pick in exchange for David Edstrom and a 2025 first round pick. Hertl comes in at a 1.3875 million salary cap retention for, I believe, the next 5 years, if I remember correctly. Until 2030 is when his contract is up. So, my goodness gracious, Vegas does it yet again, and I have absolutely no idea how San Jose got this little in return for Hertl.
Yeah, I think when, when you're a rebuilding team and you have an opportunity to trade away a player with terms, somebody that you recently extended, somebody who wants to stay there, I think it should only be for a return that's more than worth it. And I think you just said it yourself. I don't really think the return was more than worth it for San Jose. And look, for Vegas, they get possibly the second best winger, right? Or second best forward at the deadline, other than Jake Guentzel. But again, it's a risk, right? You're bringing in a player until 2030. But man, oh man, for the return that San Jose got, if you couple that with the fact that they retain nearly $2 million in salary for a player who's going to be getting paid by a rival until 2030, I just don't know about that, but I'll allow that for San Jose fans to be upset about. But for Hurdle, yeah, again, he just continues to tear down for the Sharks, and he goes over to Vegas, and the rich continue to get richer. But again, like I said earlier in the episode, this could very well blow up in Vegas's face. It could. It could. They're very talented on paper right now, but it could. And again, they don't give up this year's first round pick, but the next 2 years, they don't have a pick in the first round. Where does Jonathan Marchessault fit now, by the way, that you bring in Hurdle? Do you see get a little bit disgruntled? And then suddenly Marchessault and Smith, two of your original misfits, off the team? And I
I don't know.
bet, let me tell you, I bet my bottom dollar Kelly McCrimmon called Kyle Dubas about Riley Smith. I bet he did. And that's kind of what Vegas is getting themselves involved in, right? Their cap situation forces them to trade away players that they'll want back at next year's trade deadline. I mean, that's just bad book of business. Why would you want to come back if you're Riley Smith, right? It doesn't matter right now. But again, they bring in Hurdle. I like Hurdle as a player. And again, they got Hanifin on top of that too. So they fortified two areas of the ice that they needed a lot of help in. They're still in that second wild card spot, but Shades, I don't imagine they'll be in that spot for long. So
Okay, so David Edstrom was the first overall pick of the Vegas Golden Knights last year, obviously 32nd overall. So from that aspect, they do get a first and top prospect, but the fact that they had to give up two third round picks just to make that happen, Vegas kind of fleeced them from a value standpoint in that particular aspect.
yes, they did.
Yeah,
And San
so
Jose,
weird.
they just made a trade for the purpose of making a trade, or for the point of making a trade. And you never do that. It has to make sense. And this just doesn't make sense for San Jose.
No,
It does
no, it
for
doesn't.
Vegas. It does for Vegas, but it doesn't for San Jose. So
Hey, Burns, Carlson, now Hurdle, Couture might be gone shortly too. Mike Greer has not gotten good returns so far, trading away big name players.
right.
So, yeah, I mean,
And Duclair for a third too. I know you thought that uh that might have been a little rich, but I think remember Duclair at the beginning of the year, like I thought he might have been able to fetch a second round pick, come the deadline at least. So I think he got a little bit undervalued in that deal as well. So, but for Vegas, their roster is stacked now, but I don't know where Marchessault fits in. So that's going to become a storyline as you continue to go along here.
well, he's the reigning Conn Smythe winner, so he has a role.
Right,
Trust me.
right.
Yeah,
Hopefully they'll be able to find a way.
yeah,
But
they're Vegas. They usually do.
they valued Hurdle. They valued Hurdle as their top guy.
Yep.
So, he is, right?
Yeah,
I mean, who's the top winger on that team? Tomas Hurdle. Oh, I
maybe.
mean, you know,
It's Mark Stone when he's not injured.
it's Mark Stone when he's not injured, but he's got a lacerated spleen. So,
Yeah.
but we'll see him game one in the playoffs, I'm sure.
Yeah, we'll see. I mean, this time around, everybody is making it out to be a lot worse of an injury to the point where he might legitimately miss the first two rounds, and that's best case scenario. But knowing the NHL, we'll see.
Yeah, but Vegas continues to take advantage of a loophole. But
Yeah,
I do think that there, like you said, there is definitely legitimacy to what Stone is going through.
yeah,
Back problems persist, they're not like a one and done thing that just pop up. When
yeah.
you have them for your career. So
Trust me, coming from somebody who goes to a chiropractor, I truly know back problems, and they will immobilize you at times.
right, and that's a shame for a player like Mark Stone.
Yeah,
So hope he gets better. But for Vegas, rich get richer. That's all I have to say.
Yeah, they Undertaker sat up at the deadline for sure.
Yeah, they did. They did. Live on
And
track.
last but not least, before we move on to our winners and losers, we obviously have to talk about our beloved New York Rangers. Three trades, only one of them coming on deadline day yesterday, that being the Jack Roslovic trade. But uh, you know, in order of them happening, we acquired Chad Ruhwedel in exchange for a 2027 fourth round pick from the Pittsburgh Penguins. Solid depth pickup, defensive defenseman. Then we acquired Alex Wennberg from the Seattle Kraken in exchange for a second and fourth. I will be honest with you, we overpaid for him a little bit considering Toffoli went for a second and a third. And I think Toffoli is the better player, but that's just my opinion. So we acquired those two. And then last but not least, Jack Roslovic with literally about 15 minutes to go in the deadline is when I might have found out about this from the Columbus Blue Jackets in exchange for a 2026 fourth round pick, which will, it's also conditional and it becomes a third in 2026 if the Rangers make it to the Cup final this year and Roslovic plays in 50% of the playoff games. I stand corrected. It is not this year. There is no specific year. I'm assuming that just means any time over the course of the next 3 years. But hey, at 50% salary cap retention for Jack Roslovic, and you only trade away a fourth round pick, that is a W in my book.
Yeah, I think they traded away two fourth round picks, in which they got wins, right? I think Ruedel, I think he was probably the best depth defenseman on the market. And I think the fact that Drury was able to get Dubas to trade with him, and especially trade a player like Ruedel, like those players who are on the back end of your defense, when you go and win back-to-back Stanley Cups, they do not go overlooked. And Ruedel was not one of those players. He was a fan favorite in Pittsburgh, and he is going to be a big, big piece for our team. Like when the defense gets stagnant and when we're struggling and, in the defensive zone, when we really need a shutdown guy on that third pair, that's going to be Ruedel. So I think he's going to be one of those guys that, he may not be on the score sheet every single night, but, you're going to remember him and you're going to notice him on the ice. As far as Wenberg, I think Wenberg and Toffoli are two different players. I think you can't really compare them. But I think it's disappointing. Yeah, like when you see Toffoli go for for what he went for when you see Wenberg as well. But hey, like Winnipeg was patient, that's what patience will get you at the trade deadline sometimes. And Drury knew that he couldn't do that and that he had too many balls in the air, with Guentzel and maybe Alex Tuck, some of the other pieces that he might have been discussing with other teams that he kind of needed to make a deal. And he does that with Wenberg. He's going to be a big addition. And Roslovic, watch out for Jack Roslovic. He is speedy. He is a winger who can play on the right side. He's a centerman as well. When you think about a player that can come in and play a little bit of that Frank Vetrano role, I look at Roslovic. Might not have as good of a shot as Vetrano has, but he's explosive. And you never know what kind of chemistry you're going to be able to develop with players, especially if you have time in the top six. So good moves by Drury, and he didn't give up a single meaningful asset. Adam Sikora still here. Gabe Perreault still
Still
here.
here.
Brett Hoffman still here. Brett Berard is still here. All of those guys. Matthew Robertson, Zach Jones,
All of our
even
first round picks.
all of our first round picks. So when you're able to do that and put the fans in a comfortable position coming down the stretch run, I think you've done a good job as a general manager. So I have no complaints. Even if the Rangers get knocked out in the first round, I have no complaints. I think Drury did a good job.
Same. And I will admit I was a little underwhelmed with the Wenberg trade going into yesterday. But then as I was laying in bed last night, I was thinking about it this way. I was just like, what we traded for Wenberg is what we should have traded for Roslovic and vice versa. So from that standpoint, I'm like, okay, from a value standpoint, those two kind of cancel themselves out and everything aligned as it should be. So a second and two fourths to acquire, or three fourths, I should say, to acquire the three players that we got, I think Drury had a very good deadline.
Agreed. Agreed.
Yeah,
And if
now
they get knocked out in the first round, they look, like look at all they gave up, just for nothing, and if that happens to the Rangers, not a lot of risk attached with the players they brought in. So very happy with it, like you said.
Yeah, and trust me, like I said, going into yesterday, I was kind of underwhelmed, but I think Drury did a lot better of a job than we were expecting him to, given some of the rumors that were out there, like a first for Frank Vatrano. Obviously, there was rumors about Adam Henrique for a while, who I wanted zero part of. And obviously, we talked about it last episode, the Buchnevich rumors were there, but as the day went on, St. Louis looked more and more like he was going to keep him. Same thing with Vetrano and Anaheim, and I'm just glad we didn't massively overpay for somebody like we did in previous year's deadlines.
Agreed. Agreed. Well said.
And now to end this episode off, obviously, as we do every year, we will have our winners and losers of the trade deadline. And this is just my opinion, but in years past, there's only been a select few winners that really stand out above the others. This year, I think the list is pretty large because there were a lot of teams that had good deadlines.
Yeah.
I'm just going to start off first. I think the Colorado Avalanche are definitely on this list. They revamped the team and, in my opinion, got better. In totality, they got Middlestadt, they got Walker, they got Duhaime. I mean, little bit of a revamp. They did a very nice job. Dallas, in my opinion, is on the bottom of the list. I'm going in no, particular order here for the Chris Tanev trade, just taking a blue line that's already good and adding him to it. It's just solid team. Obviously, the Vegas Golden Knights getting Noah Hanifin and
Mhm.
you know, everybody. Tomas Hertl. I think those are two very good additions for them, and they didn't have to give up a roster player or their first round pick this year, which is a huge win for them. Uh, Sticking in the West for a second, I think the Jets had a sneaky good deadline with the additions of Miller and Toffoli. They definitely are on the list for me. And that might, I know I'm missing something. Oh, Florida, of course. Obviously with the additions of Okposo for the locker room and obviously Vladimir Tarasenko, solid addition in him, and they were my favorite to come out of the East before the deadline. They're still my favorite. The Carolina Hurricanes obviously are on the list as well for not only getting the biggest fish in on the table in Jake Guentzel, but they also got Kuznetsov, and they only had to give up the roster player of Michael Bunting along with some prospects and some draft picks. So they're obviously on the list, and a team that snuck onto the list for me with less than 20 minutes to go in the deadline yesterday, or about, because I forgot what actual time the trade happened. The Rangers need to be put on the list now because they got a solid group of depth players, and even though they gave up a second round pick for the wrong player, based on, obviously, I touched upon that earlier of why that was my thought process, but they got to be on that list too because they added some solid depth and they did not give up a whole lot. So that would be the winners for me in terms of teams that bought. In terms of selling, I think not Carolina, Calgary stands at the top of that list because for the amount of guys that they traded this season to what they got in return, obviously, I mean, they did a great job. Craig Conroy has made some difficult decisions under some difficult circumstances, and to come away with, you know, they traded away Toffoli, Zadorov, Lindholm, Tanev, and Hanifin, and in return they got two firsts, a second, four thirds, a fourth, a fifth, Igor Sharangovich, Andrei Kuzmenko, Grushnikov, Yermo, Miramanov, Brustowicz, and one of the thirds can become a second, and one of the fourths can become a third. So obviously, in terms of selling, I think they ran away with that this off-season trade deadline. And just for the sake of accuracy, obviously, Colorado came away with Yakov Trenin as well, who I forgot to just mention. And to round off the list, I would probably say Edmonton, because even though they overpaid a little bit for Henrique and Carrick, I mean, that's three decent depth options that they acquired. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I'll start off with my losers. I think Pittsburgh's a loser. here. I hyped up the three prospects that they got from Carolina. I realized I did that earlier in the episode. But it's really not for the moves that they made specifically at this deadline. It's just the direction in which they're heading. And I kind of view them as a directionless team. I don't really think the trade of Jake Guentzel necessarily helped. And maybe if the long-term plan is for Guentzel to return to Pittsburgh in the offseason, I'll eat my words. But for me right now, I don't really know where they're at, and for the first time in Sidney Crosby's career, outside of the time where he first entered the league, there's kind of uncertainty, right? Regarding the Pittsburgh Penguins and their future to compete, consistently over the next several years. And I think that's going to be a topic of conversation come the offseason. And I think Pittsburgh, at the end of the day, created more questions for themselves than they did answers at this trade deadline, and that's why I pinned them as a loser. For me, another loser, the Toronto Maple Leafs. I want to correct, it was not Goodbranson. It was Joel Edmundson, who was acquired by the Maple Leafs. And I look at two teams, quite frankly, in the Atlantic Division. I look at the Maple Leafs and I look at the Boston Bruins. I like what Boston did with Pat Maroon, but I still think they could have done more. And hey, if this year's not the year, then maybe you go and get a haul for Linus Ullmark, and put Jeremy Swayman as your number one goaltender. So I think that there were a lot of interesting avenues they could have gone and they didn't. And Toronto, I don't think they made their team better to where they're even remotely close to the contenders in the Western Conference. And I think they're really at the bottom of the contenders in the East right now. And that's something I wasn't expecting to say at the start of the season or after the trade deadline, especially. So I pinned those two teams as losers. For me, as a winner, the Carolina Hurricanes, like you mentioned, they get the biggest fish in Jake Guentzel. They get Evgeny Kuznetsov as well. But let me tell you, it is risky. You bring in those top guys, there is a ton of risk attached to it. So if Carolina, if they flame out in the first round, they have not proven that they could make their way to a Stanley Cup final with this core yet. And the one time that they got to an Eastern Conference final, they got absolutely shit stomped by the Florida Panthers in a sweep.
Twice they got
Twice.
swept in
Excuse
recent
me.
years.
Twice they got swept. But again, that only furthers the point, right? So, it's put up or shut up time. So while they made some great moves, it's also very risky. And I don't know what Kuznetsov does to that locker room as well. But I will pin them as a winner for now because they got the best player at the trade deadline. And Shades, finally, the number one winner of the trade deadline, as much as I hate to say it, it's the Vegas Golden Knights.
Yeah.
And Vegas brings in, the second best forward on the market in Tomas Hertl, a forward that I think many other teams around the league didn't really expect to be available. And you know what? Sometimes it's about just picking up the phone if you're a general manager and inquiring, right? We saw it about Alex Tuck and Chris Drury. Okay, it doesn't work out. Maybe Tuck's the next captain in Buffalo. But Kelly McCrimmon did not hesitate to call an arch rival about a player that hey, they've had some nastiness on the ice. Hertl and the Golden Knights, going back to those playoff series there, several years ago. But they bring in a top end player up front, and they bring in a top end player on the back end, and they have 75% of the salary retained for Noah Hanifin. And again, this is the team with the same core that just won a Stanley Cup last season. So they're my number one team right now. They might be in a second wild card spot, but they are the most dangerous wild card team we have seen since the wild card was implemented. So, and I don't think, like I said earlier in the episode, they won't be there for that long. A couple of teams I would like to mention,
Just before you move on to those teams, I forgot to mention this in my whole big spiel, but we did end up mentioning this at the end of last episode. Don't forget, they also got Anthony Manthus to round out the trio of players they brought in. So
yeah, I think
just very good, trade deadline work by them.
certainly. And just two more losers I want to touch on and one more winner as honorable mentions here. The first loser is the New Jersey Devils. I think Jake Allen, like I said, I like the pickup, but you trade away Tyler Toffoli, you don't really get that great of a return back. And again, like I said earlier in the episode, to me, it kind of seems like they're waving in the white flag, right? About making the playoffs this year. The other loser is the San Jose Sharks. I mean, they just didn't get nearly enough return for the players that they sold off on. And actually, two more winners, and I'll fly through them quickly. The first one are the Winnipeg Jets, who acquired Tyler Toffoli, who I think they're very underrated. I think they have a really good decor. I think they have one of the best goaltenders, and I think they're well coached as well. And the final honorable mention as a winner on my end is the Florida Panthers, who bring in Vladimir Tarasenko. They're an elite team, and they showed the Rangers when they took us down on home ice, and they've only gotten better. So this was a very, very eventful trade deadline, but a surprising one. That's how I would surmise it. So.
Yeah, definitely surprising, especially with that hurdle bombshell where Bob McKenzie apparently just came out of semi-retirement for like a 5-minute TV appearance just to break that news and go back into retirement. Just legendary. That's rock star shit right there.
Gotta love it. Gotta love it.
Oh, 100%. Now that we've gotten our winners and losers out of the way, who would you say is either your favorite or your top couple favorites, specifically in the Western Conference right now, before we move on to the East? I know we kind of just touched upon it, but I want to just get a, fortified list together, so to speak.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of teams. I mean, for me, one team that I continually write off year after year are the Dallas Stars. And this year, I'm not going to write them off. They bring in Tanev, who's a really steady defenseman. Love Ottinger so much. And they play well on home ice. They've got a really good core of players, and they can turn it on just like that. Robertson, Hintz, Pavelski, they've got that veteran leadership and that dynamic youth that I think every team needs a nice mix of if you're going to compete for a Stanley Cup. So I think Dallas deserves a mention. I think Vegas as well. I just touched on them. You're the defending Stanley Cup champions, and you just had the best trade deadline of any team in the NHL. So you have to be in the conversation. Uh, Colorado, I think they might actually somehow enter the playoffs underrated. And outside of that, yeah, it's just stacked. I mean, when you look at Dallas and Winnipeg and Colorado, Vancouver, Edmonton, LA, Vegas, like there are 7 teams there that could legitimately win a Stanley Cup. So it's scary out there west, on the West Coast.
So
My
if
teams to
you,
that. So
so gun to the head, if you had to pick a favorite, one favorite to make it out of the West, who are you picking? Not a dark horse, the favorite in your opinion.
the favorite, I think has to be the Golden Knights. I think Vegas has to be the favorite. When you add Mantha and you add Hanifin and you add Hurdle and you just won the Stanley Cup and they're coached like they are 100% the favorite.
Who's your dark horse?
My dark horse, I will not pin Colorado as a dark horse because I just think that would be an unfair distinction for what they've built.
And they
Uh,
also won the cup 2 years ago.
right. I would probably say Dallas, I would probably say the Stars. Like for all those reasons that I mentioned. Winnipeg, I would love to throw out there as a dark horse, but I just can't. You haven't proven to me that you could win consistently in the postseason, so I can't back you. But Dallas has. So, and again, sometimes it's those teams, right, that don't make the flashy moves at the deadline that have the best results, and that's where I see the Stars.
Okay, good. I like the reasoning there, but I kind of have to disagree with you because I don't look at Dallas as a dark horse just because they've proven to me the last 2 years they belong. So just for that reason, I can't pin them as a dark horse. Uh, I'm not going to say Vancouver because I still think they have a lot of proving to do, like the Jets, like you just mentioned. Kings, I don't see as a real threat compared to some of the other teams there. Winnipeg has got to be my dark horse after that sneaky good trade deadline. Obviously, we've only seen them make one conference final. They probably should have made more than one, in recent years, but I don't know. They're just a team that I can sneak look at and maybe they might do some damage, knock somebody off.
Agreed. Agreed. Not a
Now,
bad pick at all.
yeah, now on to the East. I mean, we literally both agree, and we've mentioned this, that Florida is the favorite to come out of the East for both of us. Carolina is obviously another strong team. And after, the deadline, Rangers might be in consideration if they're not for top 3 in the East to come out. But what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I'm going to start out with my dark horse here, since I started with my favorite before, with the West. I'm looking at the Detroit Red Wings
You and I share the exact same sentiment.
as my dark horse. If they get Dylan Larkin healthy and they get some pretty good goaltending, I think we're, in for some exciting times in Hockey Town. So they're my dark horse and my favorite. Like we said, Florida. But outside of Florida, I'd say Carolina and the Rangers. I'd say it's either coming from Florida as the only team in the Atlantic who has a chance to be the favorite, in my opinion, entering the playoffs. And on the Metro side, it's the Rangers and the Hurricanes. And that's where it starts and ends for me in the Eastern Conference playoffs. I don't take Boston seriously. Toronto had a terrible deadline. Philadelphia is a rebuilding team. Tampa Bay, down year, 33 and 31 if you include their overtime games. They're only two games over 500. The Islanders just starting to find their game, but I just don't buy it. And then you go to teams that are really rebuilding and selling in Washington, New Jersey, a little bit lesser of an extent, but Buffalo, Pittsburgh, Montreal, Ottawa, and Columbus. So
Yeah, 100%. My dark horse probably became it would have been the Rangers had we got made like another high profile name over Wenberg, but I gotta go with Detroit here because I mean they're finally back in the playoffs, or at least they should be. Crazy things have happened before. But I mean, like you just said, if Dylan Larkin comes back healthy, Patrick Kane is on fire right now, which has probably worked wonders for them
right.
to get to the position where they're in right now. Like you said, I can't take Boston seriously because they lead the league in overtime losses. Toronto, I would love to pin them as a dark horse, but I mean, the second they get matched up against a team that's most likely coming out of the East, they look terrible. Although this is a hot take, I do see them in the second round again, but I don't see them as a true contender to come out of the East. In my opinion, it's going to be Florida and Carolina in the conference final again, if you had to put a gun to my head.
I'll hold off on that until we get our playoff seeding, but yeah, definitely a fun race in both conferences.
I will say I do want to get matched up against Philly first round because like I said last year, I did not want to play the Devils and we ended up losing. I would not want to be playing the Red Wings right now. And obviously, we have history with Tampa Bay in the playoffs. I'd rather avoid some bad juju and get matched up against Philly.
I concur.
Yeah, other than that, so gun to your head right now, who is your preliminary playoff seeding Stanley Cup final?
Um, I guess I'll start. Yeah, my Stanley Cup final. That's tough. I mean,
I think we both have the same team coming out of the East.
yeah, take the Rangers coming out of the East, right?
I'm taking, well, if I had to put money on it, I'm taking the Panthers again.
Oh, there's a Ranger goal. Sorry to spoil it for you, but
Nice. Who?
sorry. BC. BC from
Oh, Jimmy Duncan. Let's go.
BC from Rempe with 22 seconds left in the period. That's fun.
Nice.
Anyway, yeah, gun to my head, Stanley Cup final. I think really the Rangers are coming out, with Ruedel and Roslovic and bringing in those guys. I think sometimes you know, things can get worse by bringing in some players, and I think that's what Carolina might go through. Philadelphia, I don't take seriously. Really, it's process of elimination. But I'd probably say Rangers and the Golden Knights, and that would be a really fun Stanley Cup final. So that's what I'll say.
That would be. I'm gonna wait and see how these next 20 games transpire before I think about changing my pick. But I
Mhm.
got as of right, if the playoffs started today, I would go with Florida. And the West is an absolute bloodbath. I did say on Chirp and Chat yesterday that I'm gonna pick the Stars just because things never go according to plan in the playoffs. Teams rarely make it to back-to-back Stanley Cup finals, even though we've seen it like once every 7 to 8 to 9 years. But
Right.
I'm just gonna go like Florida and Dallas. But like I said, this is probably going to change come the start of the playoffs.
All right. Sounds
I-
good.
Yeah, I'm
Your stand.
anticipating being wrong.
Well, about 20 games left to go, so we'll see.
I mean, this is the West playoffs are shaping up to be an absolute bloodbath. That's going to be really, really fun to watch. The
Yeah, it's
East is kind of weird right now because you just said two teams that might get matched up in the first round, Boston and Toronto. You can't take them seriously to come out of the East. You can't take Philly to come out of the East. I wouldn't be shocked if Tampa gets eliminated early again, because after three straight Stanley Cup finals, you don't really see too many teams make deep playoff runs within the next couple of years after that. I mean, hey, the Blackhawks, after winning the cup in 2010, didn't make it out of the first round again until 2013, if I remember correctly. So it's going to be fun.
I can't wait. I can't wait. Wish we could fast forward, but we'll get there soon. So
Yeah. And then just beautiful playoff hockey will be here before we know it.
yes, sir. Yes, sir. We'll see what teams step up, and we'll see what teams might take a tumble. So
Oh, yeah. But in the meantime, I'm just hoping that Roslovic, specifically on the Rangers, helps to spark something, along with Wenberg and Ruhwedel, if and when he gets in the lineup.
right. Yeah. No, they've looked good in that first 20. So we'll see.
Yeah, hopefully, man, because I don't know if I could take another first round playoff exit.
Me neither. Me neither. But we won't talk about that. Don't put that in the universe, you know. Better results for our Rangers, hopefully. So
Hopefully. You got anything else?
that's all from me.
Yeah,
It's
that's all for
a
me
long
too.
one.
The fact that we kept this under an hour, 25 minutes is kind of impressive with how much we talked about.
I know, right?
Yeah, beats the first episode of the season where we went almost 2 hours because that was
Yeah.
my fault. I will fully own up to that. That was in fact my fault.
No, all good. All good.
Yeah, but this has been Pucks and Brews. I have been episode number 56 of Pucks and Brews, NHL Trade Deadline 2024. I have been your host, Michael Shades Sparacino, alongside Liam, the Shellmaster Godimer. Please go in the description, like, follow, subscribe, all of our social medias down below, especially on the YouTube channel. And we will be back probably not this coming Tuesday, probably the Tuesday after, just because 3 episodes in the span of a week is overkill, especially since we just went through the entirety of the trade deadline and the 3 days leading up to it in the last 2 episodes. So we will probably be back Tuesday, the 12th, not the 12th, the 19th. Actually, no, we won't because I'm going to the Ranger game that night, if I remember correctly. So we will be back the week of the 18th through the 24th, even if we have to record on a Monday or a Wednesday, whenever. But in the meantime, I hope everybody enjoyed. If you're watching the Ranger game right now, at the time of we're recording, hope your team wins, unless you're the Penguins or the Islanders. And that's all I got. So, yeah, we'll see you soon. Later.